Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back again to another MedFit Education Foundation webinar. Very excited. We're welcoming back Dr. Melissa Petersen. Once again, topic for today is living longer with stress. Dr. Petersen is a DC, an MS, a BCHH, and a sought out expert in thriving. I love that. She's the host of Igniting Limitless podcast, the author of the best-selling book Codes of Longevity, and is the founder of the Human Longevity Institute. Okay, and again, she's a licensed doctor of chiropractic, human performance sports success coach. And a board certification in holistic health, masters in wellness, leadership, and performance, and on and on and on. Dr. Petersen, thank you so much for joining us again. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's so great to be here. Okay, so I want to get this right. Now, do I have to?
I'm sending you the controls right now.
Show my screen. All right, so I'm good.
Looks good to me.
Hi, everybody. All right, give us just 1 minute, not even a minute, for technical, getting all the things right for you all here. We're going to hit the ground running, and yes, you're reading it right. We are going to talk all about how to actually live longer and grow stronger with stress. Now, Brian, my little box looks kind of big over here. Is it okay on your end?
Everything looks good on my end.
Everything looks good. All right. So, all right, so let's go ahead and get right into this, gang. Today, here's what we're going to cover. We're going to help you to really understand stress through a new lens. This is not going to be more of the same old, thinking about stress as the enemy. Today, we're really going to unpack how stress can be a lever. It can be a solution that we can actually leverage in really specific and precise ways to help our clients heal, to thrive, and to live a long life optimized. We're going to explore allostatic overload versus allostasis and resilience, the impact that stress can have on healing and longevity, circadian clocks, biomarkers of stress, what we measure, we manage, clinical relevance, and optimization strategies. We have a lot of ground to cover today. I encourage you to get out pen and paper. I always like to do working webinars. I will be taking questions, so let's dive in. I did my TED Talk on saying yes to stress because I believe that stress is so misunderstood. It is not the problem. It can be the solution when in fact stress is actually neutral. It's neither good nor bad. It's just a demand and input into the system that the body has to be able to recognize and respond to. Yet this whole conversation around stress as we have come to know it shows that about 75% of all chronic disease processes are linked to stress as a kind of root cause or source. So we're going to unpack that today. So the whole idea is if we can better understand stress, if we can see it through a new lens, then we can be able to leverage it as a solution to actually enhance health and well-being. So again, understanding stress, that it's inherently good. You see, programmed within our very DNA, stress is this evolutionary tool that's there to help us actually evolve forward. So on the one side, yes, it's a protection mechanism, fight, flight, or freeze. We have had that conversation ad nauseum. The conversation we haven't had enough is the side of it as resilience. You see, where the body actually recognizes, responds, comes back to integrate the learning from that challenge or demand. When the body's able to come back and rest, we create new resilience and capacity. This is what allows the system to evolve as we were naturally designed to do into greater states of flourishing and thriving. But here's the really interesting thing. As I'm pretty sure we can all agree that my stress is not your stress, right? It is unique, it is very personal, and it's based on our own individual perceptions, cultural upbringings, exposure to the demand, frequency, duration, intensity, that should sound familiar from the fitness realm, right? And our response to it. And we're going to break down the categories and types of stress so you can better understand this here in just a few moments. So based on these factors, that's what's going to actually determine how our body, how our physiology interprets the input and then responds. That's where it will either be seen as good or bad, as distress or eustress. So let's break these down. Distress is what we've kind of classically come to know as the bad stress. This is perceived as a disruption to the system. It's ongoing and chronic without reprieve. This is what I call, life where our foot is always on the gas pedal. It's go, 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 hustle and grind, more, not enough time, too many demands. It's all of it. And this constant disruption, it's a dysregulation. A dysregulation is what can ultimately be caused to our hormones. It's going to lead to breakdown in our tissues, impaired immunity. It's going to speed up the rate of aging, and I'll explain this in a few minutes, lead to dysfunction and disease over time. Distress has also been found in the clinical literature to epigenetically downregulate the expression of more than 2,000 of our genes. Now, epigenetics is the science of what actually expresses the unique genetic code that we all have. It's the signal from above the gene that tells the gene what to do, turn on or off, right? To repair or to open or close, so to speak, express or repress. Now, imagine if distress is actually hindering more than 2,000 of our genes and our potential to optimally express our own health and vitality. So this is pretty significant. So this distress, this perceived disruption and dysregulation to the system, it takes its toll. So a little bit, we all have days that we are dealing with greater or lesser amounts of stress. And here's the interesting thing, as a culture, we have all normalized stress, and we've actually given it a badge of honor. And if you think about it, stress has become a way for us to validate, oh, I'm so stressed, I'm so busy, I've got so much, there's just not enough hours in the day. On the one hand, that actually feels like we're being validated as individuals. Man, if we are so busy and we've got so much that's stressing us out, things must be good, but busy must be good, right? At what cost? So when we are constantly go, 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 even if it's demands that we love, what you're going to realize is that even the good can become bad to the system if the system doesn't get that time that it needs to properly respond, to rest, to recover. So this allostatic load is the cumulative burden of the chronic distress and life's events, right? It's the slow drip, it's the never ending, and it is what adds up over time. And this is what's really interesting, because in any given moment on any given day, because we've normalized stress and we think it's just part of life and we just have to deal with it and it's just what it is, we have somehow forgotten the impact. Oh, sure, stress is bad. We even have this National Stress Awareness Month. That's why we are doing this webinar here in the month of April, because it's raising awareness. And yet we just think, well, I don't know what to do. I don't have time to go meditate. And what we're forgetting is it's these little micro moments that this stuff is adding up. And it's adding up over time. And because it's not some big acute traumatic event, we just think, it's just stress, it's just fine, it is what it is. But this is what stacks the deck against our favor. It's when those environmental challenges and those demands exceed our individual ability or capacity to cope and respond, is when that demand then goes into allostatic overload. And this is what I call the scales tip. Okay, so this is all of a sudden, when we go into the overload, the system starts to dysregulate, experience dysfunction, move into breakdown and disease. This is the fast path of what happens. Now, great, Melissa, this is more of the same. I thought you said we were not going to keep talking about the breakdown of the system, but yet it's really important, because my philosophy is when we understand the problem, we also hold the key to the solution. So let's just take a moment and appreciate where distress and these accumulative, demands begin to add up, because we typically think of stress as physical, or as mental and emotional, right? Like we're anxious, we're overwhelmed, we're agitated, we got a lot on our plate. It's kind of like, Yet stress is physical. It is mental, emotional, as well as chemical and environmental. It is the big, it is the small. So it's everything from the traumas, big and small, the car accidents to the pandemics. It's the ergonomics. It's how we sit or don't, it's how we stand and move throughout the day. It's over exercising, right? It's too much. It's our circadian clocks being completely dysregulated. It's shift work. It's our body weight. It's video gaming. It's worry and anxiety and fear and rumination and brainwave dysregulation. It's our foods, our alcohol, our tobaccos, our medications, and even our supplements, gang. We have over pharmacology, even from the stuff that we think is good. It's insulin and blood sugar dysregulation and plastics and endocrine disruptors, our household cleaners, the list goes on and on and on. And so some of this stuff, you guys are like, yeah, no, I get that. But I want you to take a look at this list. And this is not all inclusive, right? This is just some of the big stuff and some of the big things that we often forget. And so here's a window into understanding when a client comes in to work with you, what's the burden they're carrying? What's their allostatic load that's weighing them down, that's literally causing that accelerated metabolic breakdown that leads to aging, dysfunction, and disease? What is it that's impairing their ability to fully thrive? So when we can have an appreciation, I'm not asking you to go all of a sudden be an expert and treat all of these. I'm going to give you a very simple way today to understand how to toggle from distress into the actual really beneficial states that we can use to leverage healing. But if we don't know where the problem originates from, then we often can miss the opportunities to optimize. So I say 20% on the problem, 80% on the solution. When we know better, we do better. So now let's just remember, again, part of that classic conversation, the fight, flight, or freeze. When we are stressed, what is the first thing that happens? We have a surge in these really powerful hormones. The big one, cortisol. Why? Cortisol is what triggers the liver to stimulate glucose and glucagon turnover. Why? Because glucose is the fuel of the muscles, the fast, on the scene fuel so that we can fight, flight, or freeze. Now, when we are in allostatic overload, one of the things I want you to see, you're going to have circadian rhythms become affected. Those are our circadian clocks. You're going to see blood pressure is dysregulated. When we see our blood pressure is rising, why is it a sign? It's not just a sign of stress. It's a sign that your body is not in a state of recovery and resilience. It's a sign that you are in allostatic overload. It starts to suppress the immune system. We're in a pro-inflammatory response. It's counteracting insulin. There's an entire trickle-down effect, and I'll tell you, inside of our longevity certifications, we teach the top-down approach, how the quality of the signals of our epigenetic signals from how we are interpreting, perceiving, and interacting with our world and our environment, how those signals then begin to impact these really powerful metabolic pathways that will either speed up or slow down the rate of aging. And so this is a really important thing to realize, that stress is all beginning with our perception. Remember, go back a few slides. With our perception, is this something I'm excited about, or I'm like traumatized about? I'm like angry about, I'm frustrated. I don't want to have to do this. I'm feeling forced to do this. Is it want to or have to, right? So it starts with our perception, and then it goes to, well, how often, how much, again, right? That frequency, that duration, that exposure mechanism, and then our response to it. Just because we're exposed to it, are we engaging with it or not? And so it's these variables that all of a sudden, from a top-down approach, we can begin, when we understand what's happening in our everyday life, we can begin to identify some very precise levers that will really move the dial to slow down the rate of biological aging. So again, as I'm kind of alluding to, aging is a lifelong adaptive process. Aging begins the moment we are conceived. So when you guys hear me talk about living longer, growing stronger with stress, and you hear me talk about our longevity certifications and specialist programs, this is such an important conversation, because it's not just about aging and being in our 60s, 65 and over. This is a lifelong conversation, and the sooner we really understand stress in its whole entirety, then the more powerful we can be as coaches, as clinicians, as doctors, to really understand, again, what are the burdens being placed on the systems of our clients, and what are the the levers in their power, because it's not all on you. You're not there to fix them, right? Even as a doctor, what it is we are supposed to be able to do is to identify, right, where the blind spots are, where the opportunities are to bring in more support in the system, to remove the obstacle, right, to be able to create support so that healing, the innate process of healing of how the body was designed, can unfold. So this is a lifelong process that the more that we have these physical, mental, emotional, chemical, environmental stressors, the distress accumulating into that allostatic overload over time, well, what that produces is this inflammaging process. The more metabolically active and building up and breaking down, the more we have this byproduct of this inflammatory response that just builds up and builds up and builds up. There's a whole downstream effect, and this correlates with every major disease process. So just simply said today, because we don't have enough time to go into it, we take a real deep dive in our certification programs and specialist programs, but this inflammaging is really kind of the root. So in functional medicine, we talk about what's the root cause. Well, this inflammaging aging is the root cause of all disease. And that's what the study of gerontology, the study and the science of longevity is really all about. And that's what the evidence and the research shows, is that it's this metabolic breakdown throughout our lifespan. And again, there are levers that either speed that up or slow that down. So when I talk about slowing down and reversing biological age, it's understanding like, wait, our chronological years on our birthday cake may say one thing, but our cellular health, our metabolic health, and our ability to heal and live a thriving life can look and feel and express very differently. And it's all about what's happening in the outer world that's being interpreted and responded to in our inner world of our internal physiology, right? Our complex biological system. And do we like the response we're getting or not? If we don't, there's stuff that there's some really powerful things and simple things we can do about it. So let me just kind of bring this up and let's move into some of the really exciting solutions. So stress, as we know it, distress, allostatic overload, sympathetic overdrive, too much, oh my gosh, overwhelm, foot always on the gas, is a process whereby the system does not have the capacity to meet the demands. And so if we're not able to keep up, right, we fall behind. So now we can't respond, we can't recover, and the system loses resilience. Aging is a process of loss of resilience in the system. And if aging is being understood through the clinical literature as the root of all disease, then really what we see is that this allostatic overload, we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to get more of what we got. Do we like the results we're getting? It's not about another test. It's not about another supplement. It's not about another bright, shiny object. It's understanding what this beautiful, complex biological system is revealing to us. And it's much simpler than we've been led to believe. So when we all of a sudden come into this core and realize that distress is actually dysfunction, disease, it's the cause of aging, now we see here's this tipping point. Based on our perception, our exposure, and our response will be in direct correlation with the impact that stress, remember, it's neither good nor bad, it's a demand. So based on our perception, our exposure, our response of that demand will determine the impact that demand has on the system. And if we keep going and going, if we keep trudging through, hustling and grinding, we keep having all of these overloads on us, it's only a matter of time before the system begins to break and break down. And that's what accelerates disease and aging. That's what tips the scales. But again, like I said, when we know the problem, we know the solution. So what if we could tip the scales the other way? Can we? What do you think? Yes, we can. So before I go jumping into eustress, let me tell you that distress isn't all bad. Like, again, stress is neutral. So distress has a natural resource built into it, and it's called hormesis. Now, the best example of hormesis is exercise, right? So it's this process by where we expose the system to small amounts of a stress, small amounts of something that could be dangerous, harmful, taxing, overloading to the system, but we do it in small doses So we inoculate the system over time. It's a dose response. This is what actually allows us to grow stronger. Hormesis is about growing stronger, increasing our capacity, increasing our resilience, and living longer. However, hormesis doesn't occur if we have big chronic ongoing doses. So it's the dose response recovery relationship. Recovery is the key. Let me say that again. Recovery is the key. For those of you, for either yourself or the clients you serve, that even if it's like from the best place of motivation and desire and purpose and joy, but you are always going, always putting on more on yourself, on your team, on your family, on your kids, on your practice, more and more and more and more. I'm not saying that more is bad, but is it optimal for really how you want to be feeling, expressing, and experiencing your health and well-being? And if you're feeling great, then you're probably doing the right amount of dose response recovery. But if we're always doing, always going, always having our foot on the gas, and I'm not just speaking to you, those that are watching, I want you to really think about the clients that you serve. Think about all these people that are coming in to be supported by you. This is the reality of our world today, right? And so how many people are really giving themselves the time to properly recover, not just zone out and binge out on Netflix and wine and cookies? That's not recovery, right? That's more overload. That's more inputs to the system. Realize that everything from a video game, from scrolling on social media, to fast foods, to overtraining, all of these things are inputs to the system. So the hormetic stress depends on a manageable dose, a manageable demand plus recovery. To bounce back and get stronger, you have to keep the dose of stress reasonable, okay? And actually give your body time to bounce back. Exercise can be a hormetic stress if you recover, or it can be a chronic stress if you don't, leading to breakdown, right? Under recovering can transform any stress into an unwanted distress, to an unwanted allostatic overload, regardless of how beneficial. Remember, exercise is good until it's not, right? Supplements are good until they're not. Food is good until it's not. Even sleep is so good until it's not. There is always a counterbalance. So it's never an either or, an all or nothing. Life, health, vitality, the system is all about modulation. It's and also, not these extremes. So I'm going to invite you guys, we've been under this idea for so long in medicine and healthcare that it is black and white, this or that, pieces and parts. And that's not the truth of the system. We are a biological complex organism from one single cell into tissues and organs and systems all interacting and coordinating together. We are 37 plus trillion cells of one large system all integrated together. And we have to begin to bring our awareness back in as clinicians, as coaches, as doctors, as clients, to say, wait, what is it that my body needs? It's not all about up here and trying to override, and I know better, I know best. Are we recovering? Because even good can become bad. So what if we've been thinking about stress wrong, right? It's not just stress, distress as we know it. If we understand that we can look at things differently, right? The things we look at can change. And so through changing this understanding, we can improve our clinical outcomes in our clients. So let's dive into eustress. So eustress is perceived as a desired challenge, a beneficial state. This is where the heart will race, but there's no threat. So we're eager, we're excited, we are anticipatory. Think of it from going on a first date to going into that big job or a new project. Eustress actually increases. In the research, we know this to be true. It increases physical and mental performance. It boosts motivation, improves focus. It's been shown. Now, this is the important thing, you guys. Stress, when we lump it all in and say stress is bad, this is where we're wrong. Eustress actually lowers cortisol. Did you hear that? Eustress lowers cortisol. It raises testosterone, while it also epigenetically signals our DNA to express greater states of resilience and increased neuroplasticity in the brain. So think of eustress as like this kind of super resource state, okay? And this is where we can effortlessly access our innate potential. This is the tool. By understanding that stress is not all bad, that stress actually can be really beneficial. And I'm not talking about procrastination. Like some people think, oh yeah, stress is good when I procrastinate and it makes me do it. This is not the carrot in the stick. This is, we still do hard things. Challenges still come, but it's facing the day with anticipation, with appreciation, with gratitude, with a growth mindset. So where is eustress? It's in all of the same places as distress, right? And what determines the difference? It's all in how we approach it. It's all begins right here. So stress isn't bad. It's the lack of rest and recovery that compounds the demand, the load to the system, right? So recovery means a reduced activation level in the body. It's just giving that body that time to have just a little pump of the brake is how I refer to it. And so during recovery, this is really important, the parasympathetic, the vagal toning, so the parasympathetic activation dominates the autonomic nervous system and the psychophysiological resources are restored. Let me break that down. Actually, let me show you a picture. We'll get to that. I'm gonna explain that in a second. That felt like Greek or you're like, what, Melissa? Hang with me. So allostasis, so we've been talking about allostatic overload. That's the cumulative burden that crashes the system out. But there's this other side, which is allostasis. Now, allostasis is the active process of achieving stability through change. So that means I can respond. So again, a demand to the system, the body has to respond, has to recognize it and respond to it. So all of a sudden there's a demand and I have to respond. That's stability through change. And it's where the system helps to achieve homeostasis. Okay, so allostasis brings the system back into homeostasis. It's mediated by our stress hormones, as well as the autonomic nervous system, pro-inflammatory cytokines, and metabolic hormones. Now, let me explain this really quickly. The subtle difference. The way the system is designed, demand comes in, AKA stress, neutral. It's a demand. The system recognizes it, perceives it, okay? Recognize, now I'm gonna go respond. As I respond, then it's handled, so I'm gonna come back. Coming back to baseline is homeostasis. Coming back to the center, coming back to neutral, coming back into just that nice little buoyancy is how I refer to it, is homeostasis. So when we do this properly, we recognize, we respond, we come back and rest to recover and create resilience. That is allostasis. That's the normal allostatic response. Allostatic overload is when I'm recognizing and I'm always responding. There's so many demands constantly coming in. I never get the time to come back and just rest and integrate and recover. So I'm constantly wearing myself down. That's how you can think about the difference, right? Because the words are similar and it might feel similar, but there's this really important nuance. Allostasis, what builds homeostasis and resilience, is infused with, yes, I respond, and then I come back and I recover, okay? So this whole eustress, distress, good, bad, foot always on the gas, or moments of rest and recovery where the foot is on the brake, is what is regulated through the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is what governs that sympathetic fight or flight or freeze. Okay, so when you hear sympathetic dominance, that is foot always on the gas. When you hear me say pump the brake, that is our parasympathetic. So parasympathetic is our natural time of rest, digest, and connect. Now, the parasympathetic is modulated, the two sides of this autonomic nervous system are modulated by this vagus nerve. Now, this vagus nerve is this beautiful highway system, really from the brain to the body, body to the brain, that's regulating key organs. And when we are pumping the brakes, our glucose levels go down, our cortisol levels go down, Okay, some of those things that we're naturally going, our blood pressure goes down. We are able to properly digest. We're able to release sex hormones. Okay, it's a time of connection, of bonding, of integration, of creativity, of performance. It's a really important way to realize, okay, we often think of parasympathetic rest and digest as just chilling out after Thanksgiving. Everybody's so full and they're just lounging. That's a version of it. But when we begin to think about how do we use stress as a tool, how do we get into and more often be in allostasis versus allostatic overload, it comes down to this really important pathway. We want to be able to use this really important activation highway to pump the brakes. So I call this, we really want to have these micro moments. So healing a stressed out, accelerated aging, broken down system that's on the fast path to dysfunction and disease does not mean you have to remove yourself from life and go meditate in a cave for a month or a year. That is not how it works. It's all about now. It's and also, yes, and life is full. Demands are coming and we need to be able to be on, because that's also part of the juice of life, gang. It's not going away. So let's not demonize stress. It is a resource state that is essential to a healthy, thriving, adaptive, responsive system. We need it. Yet let's also realize, yeah, I want to be able to act and I also need to be able to recover. So if I'm feeling like this too much, I got to figure out how to pump the brakes. We pump the brakes by activating the parasympathetic response. We're going to talk more about that in a few minutes. So again, the vagus nerve is the body's superpower, right? This is that pathway that's toggling us out of sympathetic overdrive, letting us have active control to pump the brakes and to get into parasympathetics. My doggie is here with me. It's starting to storm, you guys, so she's over here crying. So hopefully she won't be too disruptive. But research shows us that people, this is really important, people with higher vagal tone, they're more flexible across a whole host of domains: physical, mental, emotional, social, financial. So their bodies are not tanking, they're not crashing, they're not having huge hormonal swings and moves, they're not having gut issues and autoimmune issues. Their system is doing what it was designed to do, which is modulate and respond. When you're dealing with clients that are they've had traumas, they've had significant traumas. Again, think of those stressors. They've had a lot of overloads over different times in their life or ongoing. Their system has been so compromised. Yes, their gut's broken down. Yes, their immunity is non-responsive or over-responsive and they're having autoimmune conditions. Yes, they're having endocrine disruption. Yes, and it's not just an external thing. Yes, we can clean up, we can reduce and remove some of the external epigenetic signals, but we can empower our clients and ourselves to begin to be in tune with noticing, when do I feel like I'm always in disruption, depletion, overwhelm, and demand? What are the moments in my life that are literally draining me, that I feel like my foot is on the gas and I just need a break? Those are the moments when we might not be able to change all of that for ourselves or for our clients, but can we at least give them tools to start to pump the brakes, to have these little moments in and throughout their days where, even if it's 60 seconds, even if it's 5 minutes, recovery can be experienced. So really important, and just for a moment, you guys, I really dive into this in our certification and specialist programs, but here's how this stuff kind of works. So look at this straight line just really quickly, and this is like a classic example of a workout, right? Our center line, this is our starting point right here. This is our initial level of health. A moment that is stress, a demand to the system comes in. Foot is on the gas, we have to go respond. There's actually our health, it takes a toll. Like, we have to use resources, we have to make more energy, right? The system we have to take from that savings account and go spend a little bit, if you will. We have to use those reserves, and now our baseline actually drops. Now when we recover, there's time to recover. we come back not only to where we were when we started, but we have a gain. We go up to a new level, okay? And then we have another demand on the system. But look what happens when we give ourselves that time to recover. Now we do tank, but not as low. We recover. It doesn't take as long to get back to where we started, to get to the second gain that we made, and to go to yet another gain. My friends, this is literally what evolution looks like. This is what it means for us to continue to evolve into new states. This is how the body is designed. This is what humans are designed to do, right? Generation after generation. We are not supposed to stay static and stuck and being the same and doing the same. We are literally programmed to evolve. And when we just really work with this innate mechanism, man, we literally reverse biological aging. We literally slow down those hands of times. We live longer. We compress morbidity windows. We completely reduce the risk of all-cause mortality and comorbidities. We keep ourselves physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, on all levels in our most resourceful and thriving state. So stress actually is a longevity connection. Longevity is, a life of increased resilience, capacity, and thriving. Allostasis is the process whereby the system is able to recover and increase that resilience, capacity, and thriving. Aging, biological aging, can be slowed down and reversed easily through increasing resilience. So eustress actually slows down the rate of aging. It actually helps to increase our energy, increase our capacity, increase our ability to heal and live a longer, healthy life. So the clinical role of stress is that I'm going to encourage you today, just like I did in my TED Talk, to say yes to stress, to realize it is not the problem that we need to demonize. We need to help our clients understand it is a tool and it is the answer. What I say is that the moment that we recognize our limitations, right, wherever we're feeling overloaded, those are actually our invitations to use stress as the answer. So let's understand how. So this is what I call the longevity living continuum. For those of you that kind of know that wellness, health continuum, this is an updated version, an updated take on that. So in the center, we have homeostasis. We're in that balanced allostasis state. The system is resilient. But when we have that allostatic overload over time, we're moving here to the unbalanced, to the breakdowns, to the dysfunction, to the disease. This is aging. Now, what is longevity? What is thriving? Is, again, we start here and now we are increasing our capacity. We're increasing our resilience. And just like you saw in that chart, it's not a one and done. It's not just stay in the center. We continue to increase our capacity. I call it our buoyancy. It's like the system expands and expands and expands. We're going into greater states of healing and optimization and thriving. So there isn't an end point. It's not just breakdown and disease or try to be in homeostasis in this little tight place. No, we are designed to expand into new states. And the beautiful thing is what the science of longevity is all about, and really understanding stress as the lever is even when a client comes in, and most of our people, about 70% of the population, are going to come in around unbalanced at least, okay? But they're coming in on this side of the equation. Now, in the traditional paradigm, it's like, we've got to treat this problem over here, and at best hope that we can manage it. Nobody's, and I mean, look, it's a miracle to think you might actually be able to get back to homeostasis, but in the traditional medical model, it's not a conversation of how do we get back, right? It's like, how do we manage the problem? But there's so much more, you guys. That's a small sliver. That's the smallest sliver. And in fact, I'm going to tell you really quickly, in the science of longevity, so here's the deal. Currently, our cost on our economy of sick care, of the sick care model, of just treating and managing the problem, okay? The signs and the symptoms, and that's kind of the end all be all. $3.8 trillion a year. It's 20% of our gross national product is spent on healthcare managing disease. That's not even correcting, that's managing disease, right? What has been researched, validated, and found in the science of longevity, this report came out in Nature, the Journal of Nature, last July. And what has been found is that when we can all of a sudden do more than just manage the problem, but we can actually understand, how do we bring back resilience in the system? How do we support the system to heal, to stay healthy, to potentially thrive? Meaning, how can we improve health just by 1 year? Is there a cost to, is there a value to longevity? If we can extend not just how many years we live, because look, gang, if we're living longer but we feel like crap, is it worth it? No, right? Let's just call it what it is. So it's saying, like, it's not just about living longer. It's saying, how do we live as long as possible, as well as possible? So the years that we have, how can we maximize those? So it's not this ongoing old, outdated conversation of, well, you're just getting older. Well, you're just getting older is managing and treating problems. It's not actually remembering how this human system is designed, that we are this living, complex organism that is designed to thrive and evolve forward. We are not having enough of this conversation. And so the research looked at and said, is there a value in extending lifespan and health span, just 1 extra year of healthy living, free from sickness and disease? Can we get 1 extra year? Is there a value to it? $38 trillion of value for just 1 year. 3.8 trillion, 20% of our economy is a drain right now on managing sickness. But if all of a sudden we could just give 1 year of health, we actually infuse into the economy $38 trillion. This is the tipping point. I'm telling you, longevity is, you guys, there is no mistake that Tony Robbins and Peter Diamandis have the #1 book, you know, the New York Times bestseller right now, because longevity isn't a fad, it's here to stay. This is what is going to be literally transforming the face of healthcare over the next decade. So mark my words here today, because there is so much more value in actually supporting health and thriving than sickness and dying. And that doesn't mean that we're still not going to have sick people. That doesn't mean that there's still not real problems out there. I'm not being Pollyanna. I'm telling you, what's beautiful about this is the recognition of, yes, people are on the side of the equation, but now we are understanding that there's so much more potential, so much more to it. And when we can start to use some of these amazing tools that we have at our fingertips today, we can not only slow down this rate of disease process, we can actually bring them back into allostasis, into homeostasis, where healing can occur and disease doesn't have to be the only option. Okay, we now have a whole other trajectory that we can move our people into. So how do we do it? We're going to assess, apply, and adjust. Assess the stress. You want to use subjective and objective tools. Now, you guys, I go into this in depth in our programs. Let me just tell you really quickly today, it starts with our perception. What we believe and what we perceive, it literally, our psychology informs our physiology. There is so much research on this, but for today, just know that how your clients are already perceiving their stress. Is it good? Like, are they looking at life as an opportunity and a challenge? They're excited for the day. Yeah, it's filled with challenges, but man, they're like, bring it. Or are they like, oh, okay, that's going to tell you a lot about how their body is experiencing life every single day. So we're going to understand their perspective. We're going to understand their experiences. How do they feel? Energized or depleted? That's already going to let us know, like, is their system in that allostatic overload? Because if a system, if they're feeling depleted and drained, they're in allostatic overload. And I'm going to show you some objective markers to back it up. But that's just showing us that the cell needs energy, makes energy. And if they're drained all the time, they're not either getting what they need to make what they need, or they're putting so many demands on that they're needing so much that, again, they can't keep up and make enough. Assess your client's interoception. How do they know they're stressed? Do they feel it? Do they sense it? Where do they feel it? Is it tension? Is it tightness? Is it agitation? Is it exhaustion? What does stress actually mean to them? Is it excitement? Is it delight? What does it mean? The objective markers, you can look at things like body temperature. I'm going to give you the big ones though, you guys, because of time today. You want to look at their heart rate, their resting heart rate, their blood pressure, their HRV. So you don't need any fancy equipment. You can just do resting heart rate. And here's what we know. The average, so research is going to tell you, hey, a normal heart rate is between 60 to 100. But what we absolutely know through many, many studies and meta-analysis is that there's an optimal range. So really, a optimal range is a resting heart rate of 50 to 64 beats per minute. A good range is 65 to 74. Once we get over 75 beats per minute, now we are increasing for every literally 5 beats above, we increase our risk of all-cause mortality and morbidity, meaning allostatic overload, faster track to break down dysfunction, disease, and death. So heart rate tells us a ton if we are recovered or not. Is our system overloaded or not? So here's the other thing I'm going to tell you. And how do we check this? Check your pulse. You don't need anything fancy. How else can we get more precise? Use wearable technology, okay? And all of a sudden, if they start to track every morning their resting heart rate when they're waking up, and they have a baseline, and all of a sudden there's a day where they see it's higher than normal, then that's an immediate indication that the system has not fully recovered. And what does it mean if the system hasn't recovered from the day before? That means don't hit the ground running and put 20 more things on your plate. Less is more that day. Maybe instead of an intense workout, another 8 HIIT training, you're gonna just go for a walk, or you're gonna go do some Tai Chi, or better yet, you're gonna just go maybe even take a nap that day, okay? Instead of taking on, 2 board meetings and like 5 soccer games for the kids or whatever, you're gonna go, can I have somebody else drive them? Can I reschedule something? Can I make it shorter? Can I put myself in a better state moving into it so I'm not putting as many pressures on myself? Heart rate variability is such an important marker, you guys, of stress. There's so much. There's so much to this conversation. I knew we couldn't do it all in an hour. I want to give time for questions. So that's why I'm kind of buzzing through. But I do want you guys to know that you do want to assess it. So something even as looking at their respiration rate, there's again, many ways that we can start to tell. I don't know if I'm giving you guys a copy of these slides. I'll talk with them. Take a screenshot right now really quickly if you want to read this, because I'm talking about breath, but let's talk about breath in the next section, because once we understand, once we measure and we see we have a heart rate variability is the beats between your heartbeat, you want variability. Remember, the system is designed to modulate. We need to handle and go respond and then come back and rest. So we're not always supposed to be static. Heart rate variability when it's low, that is a system that's losing resilience. Heart rate variability goes from 0 to 200. What does low actually mean? Below 50. Really, when do we see a real loss of resilience? When we're below 30. Again, you can measure this now real time through wearable technology. There's a lot of great ones out there. I'll show you a few in a moment. But this is something that both your clients can use and you guys can use. This is why it becomes really important. And here's the deal, people will obsess about it. I don't understand, my HRV is still really low. I'm doing all these things. I'm eating right, I'm sleeping, I'm doing all the things. And then they start to obsess about this. All of this is also, it is relative to the person. So whenever you start to look at data, you're looking at patterns over time. And again, we really break that down in my courses. We don't have enough time for that today, but realize that even data and wearable technology is not absolute. It is patterns over time. And please remember, the system is designed to modulate. You're not always going to have the exact same numbers every single day, all the time. And when we all of a sudden see a dip of a couple numbers, or we see an increase, by 5 or 10, all of that matters. And those are subtleties to go, why did it dip yesterday? What did you do? And people are like, I didn't do anything different. Yet, if they really think about, well, how did I feel throughout the day? Did I take more on? Did I have some stressful phone calls? Did something unexpected happen with a family member? Because people are thinking, I ate the same, I slept the same, I went to work the same, I always did. We forget these really subtle cues of what it means to be human and all the little individual touch points that we have every day that are different every day. Did you stay at work later one day? Did you not sleep quite as long? Right? Like, what could have been the tipping point that dropped the HRV for a client or for yourself on a given day that's now going to simply give insight? Not, oh my God, don't do this anymore. It's going, oh, this is a process of discovering the power of our body, of our system, of understanding what is benefiting it, what it likes, and what it doesn't like. Look, whether you like 2 glasses of wine and whether your body likes it are two totally different stories sometimes, right? So heart rate variability is an incredible tool. It really lets us dial in and see what's happening in that autonomic nervous system. It is what is able to be a great measure of health, of resilience, and it's also found through the literature to be modifiable with lifestyle, right? So with this stress optimization, with lifestyle optimization, we can improve HRV. These things are not a one and done. So once we measure the system and we actually see, systems in allostatic overload, we want to apply interventions. This is, what do I mean by apply interventions? So for those of you that are doctors, coaches, clinicians, you guys can literally be building programs, bringing in therapies, modalities, leveraging resources that help to move your system, your client's system, out of sympathetic dominance. Instead of putting more on them, even though, well, here's more supplements, they're good, I promise. Listen, when the mitochondria, when the cells are totally taxed, they can't take on more supplements. They can't take on more extreme workouts. They can't take on huge intermittent fasting windows. These things that we just think is one size fits all is not. Gang, we are in the time now of precision medicine, precision health. Please begin to get really curious and appreciate the person in front of you is unique and they are not the same as the next and the next. And so yes, this does require a bit more of us as clinicians. It gives us invitation to also invite our client into being the advocate and the ambassador of their own health, right? You can't do it for them, but you can guide them and help them to begin to understand and have the awarenesses for themselves. You can begin to use tools like stress reappraisal. Again, I don't have the time to go into all this. It's so powerful, it's so good. Clinical reappraisal, it's all about perception and psychology on physiology. What I do want to let you know is the big thing is we want to pump the brake. And you can modulate, you can activate the vagus nerve. So the best thing that you could do right away is just go, how do we help when they are always in this sympathetic overdrive? How do we start to move them back towards allostasis, into resilience, modulate that autonomic nervous system? Pump the brakes, use the vagus nerve. How do we do it? We do it through breath. We do it through stimulating and, you know, anything that's happening through here with that nerve. So humming, singing, chanting, laughing, gargling, body work, chiropractic adjustments, massage, acupuncture. The breath that I actually did in my TED Talk, great research around it. It's just a physiological sigh, 2 short breaths in through the nose, 1 long sigh, out through the mouth. You can have them do box breathing, 4 breaths, slow, soft, in through the nose, 1, so count 1, 2, 3, 4, in through the nose, hold 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out softly through the nose, not the mouth, 1, 2, 3, 4, and hold 1, 2, 3, 4. So I love to give my clients vagal toning exercises. And the idea is finding the micro moments. So where are those normal routines in their day, right? When they're sitting at a red light, can that be a cue to do the box breath? When maybe there's a cue before while they're making their morning coffee, while they're grinding the beans, could they be doing the box breath? Okay, so think about ways, could they be humming a song? Like, could there be some different things that they could start to do in their normal day that allows them to pump the brakes? Now, obviously, there's much bigger stuff, right? If their system's really crashed out, we really want to get them resting. We really want to get them recovering. We will need to bring in added support. But these are little things, like we can start so easy. It does not have to be overwhelming. We can start to modulate that HPA access. And how do we do that? Things like posture, temperature, heat and cold exposure, light and sound, neurofeedback, intermittent fasting under the right conditions, optimizing nutrition, insulin, cortisol regulation, tapping, earthing, grounding, time in nature. There are so many ways to begin to do some really simple things that optimize this entire system and use stress in a really beneficial way. I just need you guys to know that when we are in distress, we are dysregulating our circadian clocks. So these clocks are in every cell in our body. And so this isn't just about sleep-wake cycle and light and dark exposure. Like we're like, oh yeah, I'm in front of computers all day. Oh, I'm in indoor lighting all day. Oh, I'm always in front of blue light. Oh, I'm not sleeping. Oh, we dismiss it. It is so powerful because it is literally dysregulating more than 600 well-timed events in the system that keeps the body efficient, working effortlessly and optimally. We start to be in distress all the time. We're messing up our clocks. We're messing up our hormones. We're messing up our sleep. We're messing up our metabolics and our digestion and our brain and our memory and our focus and our muscles, and it becomes a mess, right? So we want to use stress. We can use just circadian timing, you guys, light dark cycles to begin to help to reintegrate the system and the clocks and the timing. We modulate the system in short bursts, right? So breath, mindfulness, rest, hum, sing, laugh. This can take us out of allostatic overload, build resilience, put us in hormesis, adjust to optimize, meaning measure, right? Engage your client, let them become our participant. What gets measured gets managed. So use wearable technology. Any'll do. There's so many great ones out there. Have them start to get curious about their data. Look at their data with them. Help them to see the patterns. Help them to learn about what this data means and what it's showing and revealing to them about their own potential. When their body battery is low, when their HRV is tanked, don't have them go out and run a marathon. Realize, help them to feel empowered, invite them in to know it is not only nice, it is necessary if they truly want to heal and thrive and live a long life optimized, that on the days that their system's tanked, then be kind. Less is more on those days, and recovery is the key. So we can use stress, you guys, inside our clinical practices and outside. We just simply use the biomarkers to assess. We apply those interventions. We adjust as the data shows us, and we support our clients along the way. We use support tools, and we support them to truly live a long, healthy, thriving life. I think we have 2 minutes for questions. I know that was a lot. And you guys, there's my information, so that'll get to my team. But literally, if I don't get to all your questions today, feel free. You can email me directly over at hello@docmelissa.com. That'll come right into my team, and they'll send it over to me. Just let them know it's from the webinar today.
Awesome. Dr. Petersen, thank you very much. That was fantastic. A couple questions really quickly from the gallery, and we can kind of do this quickly. Is the autonomic nervous system always on, meaning either our sympathetic or parasympathetic nervous system on, one or the other?
There is this idea that it is either or, it's and also. So it's not just an on or off, right? It's always, we're always responding. So yes, every moment like this is a demand. Having a conversation, listening is an input into the system. So the system's always got to interpret, but it doesn't mean that it's always in overdrive or just total rest. So that's what that homeostasis kind of, it's like, we're good. How big's the demand? Do we have to put in more response? We're going to kick in those resources to bring in the big powerhouses, go into sympathetic, kick in the cortisol. Are we able to just completely, we don't need to respond right now, we can be in a moment of ease, we're going to be more into that parasympathetic state.
Okay, good. I'm glad you touched on I'm so busy, because people do wear that like a badge of honor. And it is true, like, you know, you mentioned soccer games and all those things. I live that, and it's wild, and it's not always ideal. As a distance runner, I have been checking my pulse, and I know when it's time to take a day off for years. That's going back to Dr. George Sheehan, the great running doc who lived locally, and that was his thing. If it's high, you're ready for a day off. And we see it. The people that don't do that, they have maybe a very large peak window, you know, where they do perform excellently. After that, it's either plateau or injure or whatever it is. And it's, you know, everything relates to running for me. So, you know, and go big or go home. Usually they go home, right? That's usually what happens. They end up going so big that they have to go home, and that's just the workload. It's way too much. So I do thank you. We're gonna finish this here because we are up against the hour. You know, we even saw some doggy stress due to some outside weather there. So thank you for your co-host there, your co-presenter. And be sure, audience, to keep an eye out for the course. It's fantastic. I was able to review a bit of it myself as the product started coming in. And you know, always a pleasure, Dr. Petersen. You're fantastic, and we love having your information from you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure as always. I appreciate you all.